Okay, so good afternoon, friends and family of DeMatha. We are honored to have sports journalist and current senior columnist and editor-in-chief of The Athletic, David Aldridge, DeMatha class of 1983. David grew up in Northeast DC and has spent over 30 years of his life dedicated to covering sports, most specifically the NBA. David worked as a writer for the Washington Post, where he spent 9 years as a beat writer covering Georgetown University basketball, the Washington Bullets, and the Washington Redskins, now Washington Commanders. He has also covered big time sporting events, including the World Series, Super Bowl, Stanley Cup playoffs, and the 92 Summer Olympics in Barcelona. Before joining TNT in '04, David worked for ESPN for 8 years. And throughout his career, he has written for ESPN.com, contributed to ESPN Radio, reported for NBA TV, NBA.com, the Washington Post, and the Philadelphia Inquirer, just to name a few. David has received numerous awards as a journalist and in media, and he was also the recipient of DeMatha's Distinguished Alumni Award in 2001. So in November of 24, David and John Hollinger of The Athletic published a book titled The Basketball 100, the story of the greatest NBA players in NBA history. This celebration of basketball answers the game's toughest and most important questions, such as how should we weight championship rings versus statistical profiles versus the eye test? Who is the GOAT, MJ or LeBron? Were players like Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell propelled by the inferior athleticism of their competition, or they have been transcendent in any era? These are just some of the questions that are answered in this book, which pays tribute to the great sport of basketball while painting vivid portraits of the game's most compelling characters. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our guest of honor this evening, David Aldridge. David, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. So before we kind of dive into everything, if you could just give us just a bit about the idea and thought process that went into writing this book.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to talk to my fellow stags, past and present. This came out of a couple of different stories that we had worked on at The Athletic. The NBA celebrated its 75th anniversary a couple of years ago, and as part of their celebration, they came up with a top 75 players of all time list. They had done a top 50 at their 50th anniversary, a top 25 at their 25th anniversary. So this was in keeping with that. We knew that was coming. And so when at the Athletic, we were discussing what we could do. And we thought, well, why don't we come up with our own top 75? And so everybody who covers basketball at the time for us contributed to a top 75 list that was kind of the average. We just asked everybody on staff, rank your top 75 and we'll average it out. And that's what we did. And so we wrote a top 75 list. It was a 2-month project. It took a long time. There was a lot of people involved with it. Came out pretty well. Did very well, actually. I want to say about 18 months ago, maybe, we have a publishing arm at The Athletic. They had published a book, the Baseball 100 with Joe Posnanski, who's a great, great baseball writer. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of people know Joe's work very well. And had done a football 100, so they came to us and said, "Well, you already have 75. Could you make it 100?" So we said we could do that. So John Hollinger and I and Rob Peterson, our editor, kind of shepherded the last 25 in terms of picking who was going to be on the list and who was going to write about them. Um, and so that was the start of the project for the book. We didn't take anybody out of the initial 75 because I thought that would be very disrespectful to people that were in the 75 but wouldn't make the 100. That didn't make any sense to me. So everybody that was in the top 75 is in the top 100. Now the rankings are different because we had to add 25 people. And in subsequent, the last couple of years, you have to move some people around. Like Nikola Jokic was in the 75, but he's got to be a lot higher now, right? He's got 3 MVPs. He's got 3 NBA MVPs. He might have a fourth coming. So you had to do that. But it wasn't that hard, really. I mean, we had some discussions. We had a couple of disagreements about the last two or three guys, but it wasn't anything bad. Like it really kind of went a lot easier than I thought it would. So we got to the 100 and we spent the last year basically writing those last 25 profiles, updating the 75, the first 75, and putting them in some kind of order, and then working with our publisher to kind of make it make sense for a book. So it worked out great. It worked out really well, and very proud of the book. It's a labor of a lot of people over the last 2.5 years. And I think what we wanted to do was really honor every era of basketball. Um, I am not in the category of people that think people who played in the 50s and the 60s couldn't play. They could play. They were the best players that in the world at that time. Just because their skill set's different than the skill set of players now doesn't mean they couldn't play. You telling me Elgin Baylor couldn't play? Oh, come on. Tell me Jerry West couldn't play? That's insane. Like they could play, like they could play now. It's just that maybe there were fewer great players then than there are now, fewer highly skilled players than there are now, but the best players were still the best players in any era. George Mikan was the best player in the world when he was playing basketball. So um, he's in the book, like and as he should be, as one of the best players of all time.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I always think it's interesting this comparison of eras. Not only NBA, but the NFL. They talk about it all the time. What kind of interests me, and I know you have some of this in your book about just kind of painting portraits of certain players. I remember watching The Last Dance and just kind of getting kind of the inside look of some of these guys' personalities. I think it's fascinating, and I that's something that I really enjoy. But so when making this book, was there any specific criteria that kind of went into making this list for the top 100?
I mean, no, there wasn't like here are five things we're looking for. We didn't do it that way. It's anything like this is going to be more art than science. At least if I'm going to be involved in it. I don't mind advanced stats. I just don't think everything should be decided by advanced stats. I think the eye test has to matter at some point. Winning has to matter at some point. Like we don't do this as kind of an intellectual exercise. We have a season every year to decide who the best team is every year. Like and so that's why you play the games, that's why you have playoffs, that's why you do all this to find out who the best team is. So along those veins, over the course of a player's career, some players are better than other players, and you have to acknowledge that, right? And so, but there wasn't a hard and fast rules criteria. I mean, John came up with GOAT points to kind of decide who the best of all time is and try to make it into a number. And, it's that's fine. I'm sure there's people that like that. It's not that I don't like it. I just don't think you can reduce a person to a number. I just don't think. I think you have to have some sort of objective criteria to kind of make a decision about a person, and how good they were, and were they dominant, and not just did they win championships, but was their team always a contending team? It's something that matters to me. It's not the only thing that matters to me, but I do think influencing winning matters in a sport where we judge people by winning. Like it just seems kind of I don't know how else you can judge people in a competitive sport. If everybody is the same, then how do you determine who the best players are? If we judge everybody by, just some sort of rote formula. So that's part of it. But certainly you have to kind of you factor in it somewhat, how influential were they? Like a guy like Allen Iverson was incredibly influential on the players in his era and the players that followed, the same way Kobe is. And they're two completely different players, and they both had different career arcs. I mean, Kobe won a lot, and Allen didn't win very much at all in the NBA, but they were both incredibly influential. And that's part of the alchemy, too. It's alchemy. science. It's just kind of like it's a feel and it's numbers and it's eye test and it's a bunch of different things.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of factors that go into it, as you said, David. So we'd like to open the floor now to the audience to ask David a few questions. So how this works, if you would like to ask David a question, just there's a chat bar at the bottom. Just let me know and I'll give you a call. And then you can unmute your mic and ask him a question. When you ask David a question, just introduce yourself before you speak. And then we just ask that everyone keeps their microphones muted. David, I'm going to ask you one more question, then I'll open it up. But so obviously this gets debated a lot, and I know you have it in your book, and I don't know if you can answer this question, but it's actually funny. So today I have cafeteria duty in the lunchroom. So there's this group of students that sit beside me that are always, I mean, they're yelling the entire time, but they have this debate on, LeBron or MJ and who's the GOAT and why. And they have this conversation all the time. And then when I was at school at DeMatha, we would also have the same conversation. So in your opinion, if you can say, uh, who is your GOAT and why?
Sure. I mean, there's no secret in the book. We have Jordan 1. I mean, it's no secret. And LeBron's too. Like, it's not a secret. Like, those are the two, right? And it's perfectly fine for someone to believe that LeBron is the best player ever. He has a case. This is what I always say when people ask me this question. It's not like he doesn't have a case. He has a case. He's the all-time leading scorer in the history of this league, and he's won 4 championships. He has a case. Um, I would I would just say this as somebody who saw them both in their primes and covered them both in their primes. Oh, by the way, Kareem's got a case. He's got 6 MVPs. He's got a case. He won 5 NBA championships. He's got a case. He was the leading scorer in the history of this league for 38 years. He's got a case. Okay. So you can make an argument for him. But if you're asking me what I think, Michael Jordan's the best player I've ever seen, and it's not particularly close. Like it's the best player I've ever seen. I can't describe the physical attributes, the physical gifts, I think are self-explanatory. If you watch tape, you watch YouTube, you can see how good a player he was. To me, it's much more than that. He had the greatest single will of any athlete I've ever been around, ever. Now I didn't cover golf, so I don't know. Tiger Woods had pretty good will too. I understand that. Like the best in every sport have had incredible will, but of all the sports I've covered, Michael Jordan had the greatest individual will of anybody I've ever seen. Like it was not enough for him to defeat you. He had to destroy you. He had to annihilate you mentally, physically, um, humiliate you, really. And that's not, I get it. Like that's not always the best kind of attribute we want in our athletes. I understand that. But that's what made him singularly great was that he wanted to destroy everybody that played against him. And that allowed him to beat everybody he played against in the era at which he was his most dominant. So if you think about the NBA in the late 80s and the early 90s, now you can say that the Bird was pretty much done physically by that time. And so he never got to play against Bird at his absolute best. And that's true. I would push back a little bit on that by saying in his second year in the league, Michael's second year in the league, when Bird was at his best, he scored 63 in the Garden. So you tell me. But again, whether it was Oakley, Patrick Ewing, or Stockton and Malone, or Clyde Drexler, or Reggie Miller, or Charles Barkley, whoever it was, the best players in his era, he beat all of them. He never needed a seventh game in the finals. Never needed one. 6-0. So I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Like, he's the best I've ever seen. Like, it's just offensively, defensively, as a leader, he led through fear and intimidation. And again, not the best for everybody. I get it. But it worked for him. And it worked for the teams he was on when he was at his peak. And early, his first 7 or 8 years in the league, I never seen anybody play two ways like he does. Like be a guy that can get 40 and lock up the best player in the other team. Like he did that all the time. And I've never seen anybody who could do that. So that to me is why and it has nothing to do, it's not about being against LeBron. LeBron's a great player. I've seen LeBron lose in finals. I've seen him twice, multiple times, and I've seen him be a great player, but not annihilate people. That's different now. Kids are different now, and that's fine. That doesn't make them bad people. In fact, probably makes them better people. But but if you're talking about who's the best that ever stepped on 94, it's Michael Jordan to me.
Yeah, that's a debate that'll go on to the end of time. And, as you said, there's no right or wrong answer. I think there is something to be said, like you said, David, about going 6 times to the finals, not losing, not going to seventh game. I mean, yeah, that's hard to do. But thank you for that. So we'll open it up. I know Todd had a question. Todd, if you want to unmute your mic and ask David a question.
Good afternoon, everyone. David, it's a pleasure. My name is Todd Sanzo, and I'm class of 90. Happy to know you, sir. I had 2 questions and 2 comments. First comment is Jordan is the right answer. Absolutely. For every reason that you mentioned, plus some. He's the most dominating player I've ever seen. Yep. And there's no contest as far as I'm concerned. And the last point that you made is the crucial one, I think. It's the two-way. He could lock people up like nobody's business and still explode offensively. So yeah, he's the man in my eyes. The other comment is La Cheeserie to you, sir. I do miss you on that particular broadcast.
Thank you.
And maybe TK will have you on to promote your book. Questions, two questions. First one was, I wonder if you could speak a little bit about your time at DeMatha as it pertains to specifically what might have encouraged you to go into your career as a journalist, and who influenced you in that respect as among the staff and faculty. My other question is, I wonder if you could speak to, when you talk about comparing eras in the NBA, I wonder if for you there's any particular, and maybe it's more than one, but particular line of delineation between one era and the next, whether it be a rule or maybe the 3-point line, or I don't know. I'd love to have you speak on that as well.
Sure, Todd. Thank you. 2 really good questions. Start with the DeMatha question. I've said this many times. People have asked me this, and it's a fair question. Like, why did you decide to go to DeMatha? Did you think you could be an athlete? I knew I wasn't an athlete. That's not why I went to DeMatha. So, I don't know why I went to DeMatha. I swear to God, I don't know. I guess I associated. That's not true. That's not completely true. I knew DeMatha was a great school, right? And I was intrigued by the idea of going to a great school and kind of getting out of my comfort zone a little bit, because I grew up in Northeast DC and I went to public schools in DC through middle school, and I thought, God, DeMatha, it's like the gold standard, right? Like it's like magical. Like, you just wonder what that's all about. You want to see it from the inside. What is this all about, right? So that's probably why I went to DeMatha. And it was the best decision I ever made in my life. Like I just can't tell you how eye-opening and world-opening it was to go to DeMatha. Like it just changed my complete everything about what I thought about the world. And it just made you realize the world's much bigger than you thought it was, right? And there's a lot more stuff going on that you can be a part of, like you can contribute to. And so Joe Carroll's the reason I got into journalism. It's Joe Carroll. It's Mr. Carroll. He's my teacher, my homeroom teacher in 11th and 12th grade. We called him the Avatar for a reason. He was listed in the Mathis tagline, Joe Carroll Avatar. There was a reason we called him the Avatar, because he just was the guy that made everybody kind of see themselves differently. And just, he was the person that said, hey, I guess he read things I wrote in his English class and said, this isn't half bad. You should think about writing for this for the paper and I help out with the paper and you should join. And I was like, all right, I'll take a shot at it. And it's not that I was any good at it at all. At first, I wasn't. But you know, it was somebody, it was an adult saying, I see something in you that you don't see. And that changes your life. It changes well, it changed mine. I'll put it that way. Like when you have adults that you respect, telling you that there's more there than what you think of yourself. Like you should pursue this and see how good you can become at this. And he was the first person to tell me that about journalism. And that's what really kind of got me going in it. And so when I went to America and I was like, I wanted to try it and see if I could do it. And then I realized, hey, actually, I can do this. But Joe's the first person who told me that I could do it and believed in me. And it changed everything. It changed the entire arc of my life. And I'm forever grateful to Joe for that. And I know I'm not the only one because there's 100 kids that have told me the same thing. So whether it's Joe or Rocco or you know all of the people that were there when I was there, they influenced so many people. In Buck, you know, like in different ways. Like everybody's got a story about the teacher at DeMatha that changed their life, and Joe was mine. Oh, you asked about the league also. League delineations. I mean, yeah, obviously the first 25, 30 years or so, the league was dominated by big men, and it was an inside-out game. The ball went into the bigs all the time, whether it was Russell or Chamberlain or whoever it was at any given time. And they kind of dictated how the game would be played. There was not much perimeter play. The saying was there was 10 feet in the paint because everybody was in the paint, right? And so that's true. And then, you know, gradually over time, Eldrin was the first to kind of, I shouldn't say the first, he was one of the first to really kind of bring verticality to basketball. It was a game played on the ground, and then Elgin started jumping, and everybody said, "Well, okay, we can play it up here, I guess, right? We can play it up here too." So he was one of the first. I think the Knicks in the '70s really kind of brought team play back, right? The Celtics had done it for a very long time, but I think the Knicks really kind of made it successful. They played a very different style than most teams played. The '80s are all about Bird and Magic, and they just took it to this whole different level. And it was a perfect marriage of incredible talent, incredible rivalry, the two best franchises in the league. I mean, you couldn't work it any better than this. Like it's just like it was out of central casting, right? And so they made passing the ball cool and fun and exciting and winning, and all of those things came together. And so they took the game from where it was, which was this kind of stagnant game in the late '70s, up to this much higher level by the end of the '80s. And then Michael just took it to Saturn. Like it was just completely gone after that because he was so good. And he won so much that the league was just completely different. He made it into a major league, in my opinion. Not that the guys that played before him weren't pros. I'm not saying that, but he took it to a place where they could make an argument that they were the top league in the world after the NFL in terms of popularity. And they basically are still. Like, you know, it's basketball and soccer kind of duking it out year to year. But it's because of Bird and Magic and Michael. I think that happened.
Thank you. Great questions, Todd. We'll go to Bernard Durham. Bernard, if you could unmute your mic, please.
Hello, David. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us. I have a question for you. You know, you've been around a long time. There's big changes going on now in college sports with the influence of NIL and transfer portal. Where is this going to end? What's the vision that you see for this to settle down, and what do you think the future looks like?
I don't think it's going to end well that way. This isn't sustainable what they're doing. Like, I mean, it just isn't. Like, you just don't. There's not enough money in the system to sustain this. You know, as lucrative as college athletics is, there's just not enough money in the system to keep escalating payments to players of this magnitude, at this number, at these numbers. You know, the kid at Maryland is going to Tennessee. He's a good player. Don't get me wrong. He's a really good basketball player. He's getting $3 million. Like it's not sustainable. The kid is going to BYU next year, AJ DeBance, is getting $7 million. It's not sustainable. You just can't pay there's 356 Division I basketball schools in the United States. You can't pay even the top 100 that kind of money and have it and sustain it for a very long period of time. Now, I know there's going to be ostensibly, right, structure and a limit and $20 million, and that's all you can spend. My history is that people find different ways to get around rules. So my experience is they're going to pay more than $20 million, and so I'm not sure how you're going to enforce this, but good luck, so I don't know that it's sustainable. And this is my fear, because I love basketball and I love March Madness. And I think most people love March Madness. And the reason people love March Madness is not because, all due respect to Florida, it's a great game. They beat a really good Houston team. It's not because Florida beat Houston. It's because 15 seeds beat 2 seeds and 13 seeds beat 4 seeds. And there's upsets the first weekend. And whether it's Long Island or George Mason or whoever it is, or Butler or whoever it is that gets to a Final Four, or VCU gets to a Final Four every once in a while. That's why people love March Madness, because the little schools get a chance. They get a shot. And more often than not, they lose, but every once in a while they win one. And that's why people love it, because everybody feels like their school's got a chance if they're in the dance. If they get in, they have a chance to win a game. And I don't know that you want college football's model, where you separate the top 50 schools from the rest of college football. Like, it works for college football, but I don't think it will work because there's no tournament in college football. You know what I mean? Like there's a tournament in basketball, and there's a nostalgia and there's a romance to that. And I think people really enjoy that. And again, I think it's because there's a small d democratic principle associated with it, that if you get in the tournament, you have a chance to win, to take somebody big down. And people like that. And that's why people followed March Madness for the last 40 years, and I worry that they're going to cleave this into the haves and the have-nots. And I just think that's not good for basketball. I mean, doesn't mean that their ratings are going to go down. They won't, because people love Duke and they'll watch Duke and they'll watch Kansas and North Carolina and all the blue bloods. I get that. I know they will. I'm not saying that it's going to destroy college basketball. I'm saying it's going to destroy this thing that's unique to college basketball that has proven to be incredibly popular and successful over the last 4 decades. And I don't know why you want to get rid of that. But the answer is money. Is the most all questions. The answer is more money for the big shots, for the blue bloods, and I guess that's the way we're going to go. I hope it's not, but it seems inevitable to me at this point. So we'll see.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Bernard. Yeah, all I'm saying is I wish I was a college ball player about 10 years. I wish I was 10 years younger. Would have been nice. We'll go with Tom. Tom.
So, Dave, thank you for doing this. And, we obviously didn't mention either you served on our board, which we truly appreciate. And Bernard is on our board now. So I appreciate you guys and what you're doing there. So I have 2 questions for you, Dave. One is, I'm a little bit older than you, so I am actually partial to Bill Russell, because I just felt it was all about winning to Bill. It wasn't necessarily about stats. And secondly, the other question is just, I know you're a proud Stag, but also a proud AU alum. So just talk a little bit about Bill Russell, and then just about what happened at American University basketball, led by a Stag, this past winter.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Bill. Bill certainly has a case as well, right? If this is about winning, well, nobody won more than he did. Like, at every level, he dominated every level: high school, college, pro, Olympics, all of it. Won, killed. And as you mentioned, it wasn't about stats with Bill. It's about winning, and he's the greatest winner, I think, in the history of basketball. You can't really argue anybody else, with the possible exception of Kareem, who won at a very high level everywhere he played as well. But he was, a destructive force defensively, unlike any that we've ever seen. And the first to really kind of dominate games with defense at that level. And he was an even better leader, teammate, even though he did it in very kind of idiosyncratic ways and ways that most people wouldn't. But the respect level that the players of his era and on his teams had for him, you could just, anytime you talk to them, that there's reverence when they talk about Bill. It's reverence, like now you just can't believe how good he was and how great a leader he was and all of those. So I respect that. Obviously I was too young to see Bill play live. But I respect people that I talked to that saw him play. They say it's the same with Will. With Will, it was more kind of like he was just so incredibly dominant physically. Like you just couldn't believe how the numbers he put up. But Bill was just an incredible winner. And I don't get too intimidated by many people I talk to because it's my job. I have to talk to people. It's okay. Bill's one of the few that I just kind of like sat back because I didn't. What am I going to tell Bill Russell about basketball? You know what I mean? So I was just like, why did you tell me something about basketball? I'll just listen for the next 25 minutes. And that's what I interviewed him a few times, not very often because he didn't do a lot of interviews, but the 2 or 3 times I interviewed him, it was just, gosh, what a treat. What an honor it was to speak with him. This past year, Tom was one of the best rides I've ever had in my life. I'm in the journalism business. And journalism requires you to be kind of skeptical about everything that you hear. The old saw is if your mother tells you she loves you, check it out. call some people and check it out. I'm cynical. Cynical is the wrong word. I'm skeptical about sports for a lot of reasons, which we don't need to go into. But this year with AU was just a magical, special year. Dwayne Simpkins, who has been our coach the last 2 years, that we were fortunate enough to be able to hire, just has brought an incredible amount, not just energy, but just an incredible amount of sophistication to not just our players, but I think our fans as well. Just understanding what you have to do to win at a high level, the commitment you have to make, like the buy-in's got to be complete and total. And he got those kids to buy in. We were just talking earlier about the landscape in college basketball. We had 6 seniors on our team this year, 3 of whom were grad students, which means it was their 5th year at American because of COVID, basically. But for other reasons, they had the opportunity to transfer elsewhere because they could leave and go somewhere else and get a pretty significant NIL money. And our best player had some really good offers from ACC schools, from A-10 schools, and he came back for a 5th year. And so to watch those kids kind of play their best basketball at the most important time of the year, which is the Patriot League tournament, and to see the fans come back and fill up Bender Arena and sell the building out again, and to see the students kind of understand this is why sports are important. This is why sports matter to whether it's a high school or a college or a city. They matter because they bring people together. There's nothing that's bringing us together right now as a country. It's all argument and yelling and divisiveness. There's nothing that's unifying us. And sports still can do that. And it did it with us. And it's the best. I said it's the best group of families I've ever been around. And I graduated AU 87, so it's almost 40 years. I've never been around families that I like more than this group of families of the kids, of the players. It's sports and it's competition. And so inevitably somebody thinks, well, my kid's not playing enough. He's not getting enough minutes, not getting enough shots. Why is the coach not like my kid? We're going to transfer. And it's just endemic to college basketball now. It just is. And that's the reality of it. There was none of that this year. There was none of it. It was just, how do we win as a team. And it was just refreshing. And, you know, it just harkened back. And I never like to compare people, but it reminded me of Coach Wooten. Like, it reminded me that's what DeMatha always did. How do we figure this out and win together and not worry about who's got scored, has the highest scoring average? Like, let's win this together. And that was what it felt like. And it was just great to see. And it was a marvel. And it's no surprise that it was a DeMatha guy that got us there. So I'm not as surprised at all. Dwayne's a special guy. And I'd love to say we're going to keep him for 30 years, but we're not. He's too good. He's too good. So we're going to enjoy him while he's here.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I totally agree. Shout out to Coach Sipkins for sure. So David, we'll do one more question from John Farrell, and then we'll close out. So John, if you'd like to ask David a question.
Sure. Dave, thank you for being on the call. We know time's precious. John Farrell, I graduated in 78 with Tommy Ponton there. Before I answer the question, I just want to share, and I'm sure you know this, I served 26 years in the Air Force, and I now run a nonprofit, a CEO that takes care of wounded warriors, veterans, and veteran spouses, secure employment, and fight the VA to get a higher disability claim compensation. But the DeMatha brand is strong. My wife affectionately calls me Logo Boy. I have a lot of DeMatha paraphernalia. And I can't tell you because of the Air Force and my job, I've been in all 50 states and most countries throughout the world. And I will be in Timbuktu somewhere, or I'll be overseas somewhere, and somebody will come up and see DeMatha Stags. And of course, they always go to the basketball. And then I was a musician. I've been a musician my whole life, not an athlete. So I tell them about how good the band program is. So I appreciate all the comments you had regarding DeMatha. I know it set me up for success. So I just wanted to say that first. And then my question is, out of all the basketball you've ever seen in your life, is there one singular moment or one singular game that stands out or memory where it was either crazy or something abnormal, something you didn't expect?
Thanks for the question. It's a good question. Yeah, the dream team. It was the dream team. It was 1992 in Barcelona, Spain. That was the one time I went into my boss's office in the fall of 91 and said, I'm covering that. Don't even think about putting anybody else on that team. That's mine. And he gave it to me. And it was everything I thought it would be. It was spectacular. It was just spectacular. Just seeing it's different. You know this because you've traveled. When you go to a foreign country, when you go to another country, you wonder what people think of the United States and the people who live here and whatever. And so, like, to see how revered Bird and Magic and Michael Jordan and Charles Barkley and all those guys were in Spain, and in France and all the other places that they went before and during the Olympics that year. It was an eye opener. I was stunned by how beloved they were, right? Like, it was just like, wow, I didn't realize. You don't realize it until you're not in your country anymore. Like, they really do know Michael and Magic. Like, they really do. Like, to see the fans come out and the players at that time. It doesn't happen now because basketball's really become universal, but the players were as mesmerized as the fans were, so it was great to watch. They weren't playing. They didn't have opponents that year, and they weren't playing Yugoslavia, or they were playing basketball. They were playing against the game of basketball to see how good a basketball team could actually be. And they were so good. I mean, it was just so dominant that it wasn't even competition. It was just, here's the best we can offer to the world in this sport. It's the absolute best we can offer. And it was unbelievable. It was great to watch. Charles Barkley was the best player on that team. He was. Now, Michael might have been taking a back seat for whatever reasons. Michael was taking a back seat, but for whatever reason, he was like, Charles can have it. Like, I'll just fill in. And he did. He had his moments, but for the most part, it was Charles's show. And it was just great to watch it. It was great to see how people reacted to it. And it's terrific. It was great. It was great to watch it. The only other thing that kind of compares to it is what the Spurs in 2014. when they beat Miami. That's the best basketball I've ever seen played in the NBA. It's team basketball that I've ever seen. Like the ball didn't touch the floor. It was just it was pop, 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 guy to guy to guy to give up a good shot to get a great shot. It was just they were great. They were great in that series. And it was so mentally tough because that was a team they had lost to Miami the year before in the finals and really awful fashion. They had the game won, they had the series won, and they blew it. They choked basically and gave the series away. And that same team came back the next year and just annihilated Miami in the finals. And it was because they were so mentally tough that they were just they wanted Miami so bad. They didn't want to play anybody else in the finals but Miami. And that year, that series, they were awesome to watch. They were just, it was beautiful to watch them play basketball that year.
Thank you, John. So awesome. That will conclude our afternoon with David. So thank you to everyone who joined the call for all your terrific questions. Thank you especially to David. I know you're super busy, so thank you for taking 45 minutes out of your day. It's always a pleasure chatting with you and having you share your wealth of knowledge in the sports world and beyond. To everyone else, we're looking to do this in the future as well with other alums. So just stay tuned for more information. Lastly, most importantly, make sure to buy a copy of the Basketball 100. I know you can get it on Amazon. David, where else can you buy
There you
it?
go.
Just anywhere you can buy
Amazon's
books?
good. Amazon's
Okay.
good. Just go to Amazon.
Okay. So
And
make
it's in
sure.
bookstores. Politics and Prose has a bunch of copies. So anybody local, you can get it. You can get it locally as well.
Awesome. So let's make sure we buy that. So that'll conclude our afternoon. David, thank you so much. And we'll talk soon.
Have a good day, everybody.
My
Thanks,
pleasure.
guys.
Thanks, everybody.